next person that we're going to hear from is Jim Rubens. Senator Rubens has served as a state senator in New Hampshire, where among other achievements, he helped to establish charter schools, which were a really great thing to happen to the state. He's also very well known as a prolific entrepreneur. He started several companies. They've been quite successful, and I think that that's a really good track record. So could you please welcome Senator Rubens?
So indeed, we are, Jim Rubens here, running for U.S. Senate. I'm actually running against an incumbent, Rubens versus Ayotte, and many of you are probably hearing from the establishment that the primary is not won, and I've got to differ with that. And what we're also being asked, it's embedded in that question, is really to abandon our core principles, to abandon what Republicans believe in. We believe in constitutionally limited government. I've been to many meetings over my 22 years in state politics here, starting with my time in the state senate, and at every single meeting we talk about this value. And we talk about individual liberty and responsibility. So what I believe is that this is what I did in the state senate. It's how I got the charter school law passed. It's how I got SB 2 voting passed into law. Our principles work, and we can take them and we can turn them into solutions. So I'd like to tell you what these solutions will look like in 2016 in the United States of America. We got some pretty substantial problems in our country that are not being addressed in Washington right now. And I'll start with our budgetary problem. We are in debt. Congress is addicted to debt, spending and debt. And they always tell us that maybe after the next election, give us the House in 2012, 2010, give us the Senate in 2014, and then we'll get cracking. Well, you saw what happened in 2014. We had a massive sweep, 9 new Republican U.S. senators, and they put up the white flag. They says we're not gonna negotiate with the Democrats. We're just gonna pass their budget. So it's always somewhere over the rainbow, and it never happens. They never get to it. It never gets balanced. So, and we're looking at about $1 trillion a year now. This is how bad the hole is now. It's $1 trillion a year. So there is a way to fix this. There is a way to fix this problem, and the clock has run out. And it's what the Republicans did in the 1990s. We, in the House, we got together and we voted no on the budgets. And here's what happened. When we voted no, Republicans in the House, in the budgets, we dragged big spending Republicans, and there are a lot of them, and we brought Democrats, we dragged them, and we dragged the president to the bargaining table, and we got 4 years of budget surpluses. And there were some great benefits from that, in that the economy grew like crazy. And this deficit we've got right now, it looks free, because, China's loaning us money and they're printing it. But the problem with this is our military leaders tell us this budget deficit, this debt we've got around our neck in the country, this is the single greatest threat we've got to U.S. national security. You can't be for U.S. national security when our military leaders tell us that this debt-addicted Congress continues to do this. And it also starves us of future prosperity. We've got a Japanese-style economy almost right now, no growth. Okay, and this has got to change. So Republicans, and this is the solution, this is what it looks like, we vote no. And if you look at the October 2015 vote, you look at the way Republicans voted in the U.S. Senate. I won't name any names, but about half of our U.S. senators voted for the Democrats and Obama's budgets. And half of us voted no. So you put 5 or 10, maybe even 5 more Republicans who actually believe in our core principle of fiscal responsibility in the U.S. Senate, and we will have the clout to bring them to the bargaining table, and all the pork has got to go, and we will balance the budget. The next issue is the economy. We've got to have what Republicans believe in for the United States economy. We've seen what the Democrats do. They've loaded us down with massive amounts of complexity and regulation. So we've got to break with the lobbyists. The lobbyists like complexity. Morgan Stanley has 50,000 people on staff who deal with regulatory intervention, regulatory affairs in Congress. And so big business can deal with this, and you see this kind of regulatory overload. Look down there, and you can see the community banks in our state that loan to small business, where all the growth in jobs is. Our community banking has shrunk in New Hampshire since this has taken over. This is an example of what the lobbyists want. The lobbyists are paid for by the big businesses that can handle the complexity. small business can't. So we've got to do what Republicans have been talking about for so long. We've got to reform the tax code. We've got to bring the rates down. We've got to take away the complexity, and we've got to do the same thing with the corporate tax code, and we've got to do this with regulations too. There are 15 times the number of laws now compared to where they were just after World War II. And the regulatory state is a fourth branch of government. It's vastly overburdened and complex. And here's what I propose we do. This is what a Republican approach would look like. We ought to take all the regulations. Every 15 years they sunset, and they come back to the Congress for an up or down vote. And that means, what that means is that the excess regulations and the redundant regulations will all get weeded out. And this is not that weird, because this is the way the New Hampshire legislature does it. All regulations propounded by the regulatory apparatus in New Hampshire come back to the House and the Senate for an up or down vote. Same thing in the U.S. Senate. It's not that weird. And so we need to tame the regulatory overload. Fixing the economy. On the same subject again, we've got to break with the lobbyists. We've got to have trade and immigration policies that are good for the people of the United States of America. What does that look like? We have trade policy. We've seen what happened with NAFTA. We are bleeding $600 billion a year out of the country. China is getting a big benefit out of it, okay? And with that bleeding, that hemorrhage of money for year after year are going to jobs, and our wages are going down. So I differ with the incumbent against whom I'm running, who voted for this open borders gang of eight policy. That bill, that gang of eight bill, and by the way, the incumbent who I'm running against promised to seal the border, secure the border. She promised no amnesty in 2010. I worked for her in 2010, gladly. And she gets down there, drinks the Kool-Aid, and votes for the Gang of Eight bill. Now, that Gang of Eight bill, we all know, it gave amnesty, the lawbreakers, but it also, the border is still wide open. The drugs are coming right across this border. The drug mules are walking across the beauty. And several thousand people from the Middle East, they're buying mules, and they're sneaking across our southern border. Several thousand young males from the Middle East are coming across that border. This is unacceptable. And with all that bill, that Gang of Eight bill, that would have added 30 million additional legal immigrants in the first 10 years. That's 30 million additional legal immigrants. Now, this is driving us exactly into what we've seen in Europe. Look at Europe now. Flood of immigrants. They can't assimilate. You have enclaves, and they're not buying into the culture there in Europe. And women are being roped in Munich. It's just, my sister lives there. This does not work. So the flood of immigrants, why are they doing this in Washington? I guess they want the border open. They want wages down. I differ with this stuff. So those are some things we need to do on the economy that's really different. And on the Constitution, limited government. Again, I differ. Here's what it would look like in education. As I say, you folks know, I wrote the charter school law in the state because I believe that parents are in a far better position than government bureaucrats to know what will work for your kids. And the charter school is working. Our top testing school in the state, our top testing high school is a charter school, and it operates at 1/3 the cost per student. So we can show this is a Republican concept, and it's showing how we can save taxpayers' money and at the same time bring educational results way up. So I differ again with some of the Republicans and my opponent who voted for this thing called the Every Student Succeeds Act that came through last year. And for the first time, that bill puts the states in a position of having to go down to the Washington Department of Ed and get approval for education plans for the state. And they will use this ESSA bill to cram Common Core down our throats, okay? The opponent that I'm running against voted for this, okay? The incumbent I voted against voted for something called AFFH. What does that do? That puts the Department of Housing and Urban Development in control of your local zoning. If HUD doesn't like the demographic makeup of your town and city, they can force you to change your zoning law. This is completely, there is no authority in the U.S. Constitution for the federal government to control state education. There is no authority in the federal government to control our local zoning. And the incumbent voted for this stuff. And if you vote for this person on this coming Tuesday, if you vote for her, you're going to get more of this stuff. If you like that stuff, you're going to get more of it. So, again, this is what constitutionally limited government looks like. Gun rights. I've got a little thing right here. It's ISIS hunting. Because we've got terrorists on U.S. soil right now, okay? And I'm going to get into this issue. This is the issue of national security. I'm going to start with Hillary Clinton and her failed nation-building wars. We've had several years now. It began with Libya. Remember Libya? Our military leaders warned us. They warned Hillary Clinton and Kelly Ayotte, the incumbent against one running, who cheerled to bomb Libya, take out Gaddafi. They warned us in advance, our military leaders, if you do this, you're going to have a failed state and you'll have an ISIS terror haven. That's exactly what happened. They warned them again. They wanted to arm and fund and train these so-called moderates in Syria. They warned our military leaders, don't do this because you'll wind up with an ISIS caliphate, and that's exactly what we got as a result. And now, most recently last year, these people, Clinton and Ayotte, they wanted to arm Saudi Arabia with our bombs. We've sold Saudi Arabia bombs, $100 billion of military equipment just since 2010, and they're dropping these bombs on hospitals and children, and Al-Qaeda is stronger than it's ever been before. This is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, stronger than it's ever been before in Yemen. This is happening in Yemen right now. These failed nation-building wars, the strategy adopted by Hillary Clinton and the incumbent against who I'm running, is making America less safe. It's spreading ISIS. We've got to reject this and have a strategy built on keeping America safe. What does that look like? First of all, you secure the borders so the bad guys and the drug mules don't get in. If we don't secure the borders, the bad guys, and as I say, there are several thousand of these Middle Eastern young men sneaking across that southern border. Bad idea. Item number 2, we've got to force Saudi Arabia, the Gulf state monarchies, and Turkey. They have been funding ISIS, okay? You can't wink and nod at their funding source and pretend to be against ISIS. You've got to cut off the money Saudi Arabia is funding them. Tell them, force them, using all the diplomatic, economic sanction tools we've got. We've got to step playing footsie with these people. Number 2. Number 3, if and when war is necessary, there's something called the Constitution of the United States, and it requires Congress to vote under Article 1, Section 8 to declare war and invade the incumbents in Washington done it, and a part of that debate is going to be a debate about how to win and exit. Because we have lost the Afghanistan war, we have lost the Iraq war, we have losing the Syria war. That Syria war conducted by our so-called ally Saudi Arabia is leading to generations more hatred and a stronger Al-Qaeda. So we need a plan to win and exit. And number four, what we do is now that we've got, as I mentioned, ISIS on our soil, they are here in America as a result of these people's failed policies. The Second Amendment, my opponent, the incumbent, voted with Chuck Schumer to give Loretta Lynch the power to put you on a no-gun list if you're politically unacceptable. Okay, the incumbent against whom I'm running did this, and this is exactly the time we don't want to weaken our Second Amendment rights, because these rights are how we defend ourselves in the minutes before our civil defense authorities can get there to protect us. So we, at this time, we celebrate, protect the right of peace and freedom-loving Americans to use their God-given Second Amendment rights to defend themselves against these people. And hey, that's why it's in the Constitution. I differ so fundamentally with the incumbent against who I'm running, who is sold out the Constitution with Chuck Schumer, for God's sake. Okay, so this is what a national security strategy, and there's a lot more at JimRubens.com, will look like. So I'm running for U.S. Senate. You all know what the establishment wants. They want you to fall in line, abandon our principles. They say our principles don't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is the money coming in from the lobbyists in Washington. And I say, if you vote for that stuff, you're going to get more of it. Do you want more of that stuff? Do you want the federal government taking over our schools? Okay, so I'm illustrating what the kind of choice we are looking at on Tuesday. Now, here's some very, very upside on this thing. You've seen the polls. Ayotte is behind Hassan in every single poll, okay? There is zero risk in voting for me. The election funding system has changed totally. There are tens of millions of dollars in the banks, on the book, to support the winner of this primary coming up on Tuesday. And the reason for that is because the control of the U.S. Senate is at stake, whether Republicans or Democrats. And the folks who have this money do not want this U.S. Senate to fall, and they are going to get behind with that money. It's already there, the nominee of our party. So the choice for you folks right here in these tents, because the money is there. Do you want someone who believes in our fundamental values that we talk about in every single one of these events? Do you believe in fiscal responsibility? Do you believe in constitutionally limited government? And if you do, you've got a choice. You can vote for Jim Rubens for U.S. Senate, and I will fight for you. I will not be bought out. I will not sell myself out to Washington, and I will keep my promises when I get down there. So I thank you folks very much for your time. Love to have your support. Thank you.
Croc TV.